What is going on, everyone? Welcome into Big Time Football Talk. Glad to have our first guest in the house, Zach Plaxico, coming on today. We're going to talk about. So yesterday was a rough day. If you're a Michigan fan, if you're a Spartan fan, you have a sense of hope with the Mel Tucker era. So let's get straight to it. Plax, what were your takeaways for a rough day for the Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh yesterday?
Michigan State came out, punched us in the mouth. We played into their hands. We ran up the middle. We didn't get outside. It was almost like Harbaugh went back to his stubborn ways with wanting to pound the rock. He didn't get the speed and space like we had week 1 against Minnesota.
Yeah. And a tough one for Jim Harbaugh. Now moves to 3-3 against Michigan State, 1-6 against Michigan State and Ohio State at home. So, my take is this is it for Harbaugh. I think they part ways after this season. It has just been a disaster. And yesterday, Michigan State, really, Michigan could not stop the deep ball, and the penalties on Vincent Gray was ridiculous. But I think that was one of the biggest shocks to me that no one talks about. I think if you're a Michigan fan, you realize this Vincent Gray is really their number one corner on the team and really was exposed. I mean, they had to bring in another guy, but it wasn't all on Vincent Gray. You can't throw him under the bus because Don Brown never chose to go to a zone. Still year 6 now. Obviously, this is not year 6 of Don Brown, but still several years in with Don Brown, if you've yet to make adjustments. Yeah, Plax, what did you think about Don Brown and his failure to make adjustments yesterday?
Don Brown should have been gone after last season. He's always a press man-to-man, bringing a blitz. He never makes halftime adjustments like he should. It's just he's not a terrible coach. He just doesn't know how to adjust.
Yeah,
and you need that.
Yeah, and it's like I talk about that Alabama game. Like they were trying to play press man-to-man on Jerry Jeudy. It's just like stuff like that. Just he seems to never learn for it. It's the problem with Don Brown's defense. They really just feasted against the bad teams, and it just really gets exposed against the good teams because they know what Michigan wants to do. And like you said, Michigan State played. What was it? Right?
They could have played.
Yep.
You gotta give them credit. They exposed us on the outside, threw it up, let the receivers go make plays. Ricky White looked good, true freshman. He looked real good.
Yeah, that's the problem I think I've seen too many times under Harbaugh, and that's if you want to make another strong case why he should be gone, is it's just like there's something. It seems like even when Michigan State's beat them in the past, they find something that works and then just continue to exploit that repeatedly on Michigan. Like I look at that, though, even in 2016 when Michigan was heavily favored in that game, and it should have been a way bigger defeat. They came out and L.J. Scott pounded the ball up the middle on him. That was something that kept just working all game. It was stuff like that. And that game, they let Michigan State fight back in that game too. And I think it was a case Michigan may have been overlooking them a little bit. And you think they would learn at this point that, Michigan State's going to give them their best shot. That's the Super Bowl or whatever you want to put. That's the game they key in, and Michigan, they got two big rivals, Ohio State and Michigan State. And it's hard to really focus in on two rivals like that. It's hard to, put all that time and extra time into two teams when Ohio State is just Michigan and Michigan State, they just focus in on Ohio State. But, Jim Harbaugh just getting bashed everywhere, all in the media. And for a lot of guys, Colin Cowherd was a guy that defended him for a long time. I don't think he can defend Harbaugh or anyone at this point can defend him. But
he actually tweeted yesterday that Harbaugh should be done. It's just ridiculous. Year 6, and he's not making the adjustments that need to be done to win these big games. This honestly wasn't even a big game. 25.5-point favorite. You can't lose that game. That compares to the Appalachian State loss. You really just can't lose that.
Yeah, why? This is such a big upset too because the Appalachian State and the things like Georgia Southern and Florida happens in college football. That happens because, really it's the team doesn't come out to play and they get upset a lot of times. But, in this case, this is inexcusable because, Michigan should have their best shot every time they play Michigan State. You know what I'm saying? Because, like USC Stanford that one year, like Stanford was still a huge underdog, but Stanford's still a Pac-12 opponent. Michigan State's still a Big Ten opponent, even though they're not. This isn't one of their best teams in recent years. It's no excuse. And yeah, the worst loss of Harbaugh era. Bottom line.
That's been Harbaugh though. He doesn't get up for these big rivalry games. It's just they feast on the small teams, the easy teams they should beat. Michigan State and Ohio State, they struggle. They don't get up for the big games, and it's inexcusable.
Yep. And so, what do you think about State moving forward? Is this a team that could challenge for the Big Ten?
I wouldn't say I don't think they're going to challenge for the Big Ten. Not this year, at least. Mel Tucker, first-year coach at Michigan State, obviously. He's struggled at past places. He is a good recruiter, though. He'll get some recruits. Well, them beating Michigan, that was a huge win for him moving forward in recruiting. Obviously, it's Ohio State's to lose. No one's going to really compete with them in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I just thought I was one of them that was really on board of Mel Tucker because of what he's done in recruiting at Georgia. Obviously, recruiting, like we talked about at Georgia, is a different animal than recruiting at Michigan State because at Georgia, you got so much talent right in your backyard. But Tucker is a guy, it seems like he gets his guys to rally around him, and it seems like his recruiting, is picking up. He seems like he's landing a little bit like D'Antoni, landing some of these 3-star guys like this tight end from the Detroit area and stuff like that. The guys that put up a big stats, but just for whatever reason don't get the national attention, but are still good players and still have a chance to develop and have success in the program with good coaching. But
3 stars, I think 3 stars come in hungrier than what 5 stars do. Obviously, 5 stars have better talent, but 3 stars I feel like develop a little bit better. Well, not most of the time, but sometimes these smaller colleges they develop a lot better.
Yeah, you look at D'Antonio, Le'Veon Bell was a 3-star. There's some other guys, Shalik Calhoun, 3-star guys. You look at they had a few there was some luck in there. It was just a collection of a few recruiting classes where guys they just all hit on. It was kind of wild looking back on it because if you see some of these real elite teams all time, Florida State with like a collection of talent, Florida State in 2013, Bama in 2011, 2012. It was just like cycles of recruiting classes that just all formed into, a bunch of players all still there at the same time. And Michigan State had that with D'Antonio, and they could get back there with if Tucker keeps hitting on some of these guys and they develop them. That's the other advantage. Some of these guys will stay in the program 4 or 5 years as opposed to, 2 or 3 at Bama. So if Tucker could do that. But
yeah, him winning that game yesterday is definitely gonna help recruiting the state of Michigan. He should get better recruiting in state. Michigan's kind of fallen off. Michigan hasn't really owned the state like they have in the past either. It's leveling out, starting to level out in the state. We're losing recruits to Bama, Ohio State, Penn State. It's not. Michigan doesn't own the state like they did at the beginning of the Harbaugh era.
Yeah. Yep. And for Michigan, it's I don't know McGrone's status. Did you see is McGrone out for some time now?
I think he's going to be ready for next week.
He'll be ready for next week. And it's just too bad because against it's one of those things. Is Minnesota not as good of a team, and Michigan just took advantage of a not inferior team, but. It's just sad to see the offensive production look so effortless last week against Minnesota, and then now this week it was kind of just like pretty painful to watch them move the ball. Even the drives they scored on was, didn't look that easy.
It was classic Harbaugh trying to impose his will on these bigger teams. You can't do that. You gotta. Last week it was speed and space. That's what Josh Gaddis was brought in for. Speed and space and. You just didn't see it yesterday. There was a lot of upside or in the middle. There was no getting the ball to the outside. Just we didn't use our talent like we should have, and that's been the consistent problem with Harbaugh.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we noticed, and you can touch on this, Plax, is college football has evolved so much that just like you can't play bully ball and you can't play like you did at Stanford, physical, tough running, and win with a great defense. And even Nick Saban, who was a guy that was all for that for a long time, has really run some of the spread offenses, and he's recruited. They recruit the cornerback position so hard now because you need elite corners in college football. and you got to have stud receivers, stud corners is the bottom line, and you can't play bully ball like Harbaugh did at the 49ers, and just win with great defense and control the ball on offense, because it's not a control. What am I trying to say? It's not a thing where you can control the clock anymore. You got to put up points if you want to win in this league. It's how Clemson, Bama, and Ohio State are doing it now. So
look at LSU last year, hiring Joe Brady. The team before that, I mean, they were decent. They weren't what they were, but in 1 year, Joe Brady changed that whole offense, and they put up historical numbers on the way to a national championship.
Yeah, and then that's one thing I told you. If there's a candidate, because there's a lot of Michigan fans, and I get tired of hearing this, is like, who are you going to get if you have to replace Harbaugh? And you could look at a young guy like Joe Brady, who was the offensive coordinator at LSU and goes to the NFL now and is having success with a Carolina Panther team that frankly doesn't have a lot of talent on it. And you could hire him, bring him in. He could, see what he can do. You need a clever offensive mind. That's usually a success for a great head coach. A clever, young offensive mind. You look at in the NFL, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, they're young, good offensive minds, and that's something you could just roll the dice with. And if Michigan could get an elite offense and have something similar to what they had at LSU, combine that with, obviously Don Brown probably went there, but combine it with a good defense and the recruiting Michigan has, you could see what you could do with that. I think you can definitely do a lot better than 1-6 versus Michigan State and Ohio State at home, and then 0-5 against Ohio State, and whatever crap record Harbaugh has for bowls. But that's
it's embarrassing. Yeah. He was brought into. He's not a terrible coach, Harbaugh. There's a lot of, I know, State fans out there that say Harbaugh's he's not a terrible coach. He's a good coach. He's bad in the big games. He was brought in to beat Ohio State, win Big Ten championships, possible national championships, and he hasn't lived up to what he should have.
No, and that's the thing. It's when you get hired for a job, there's expectations you have to meet. Like, you could be a good employee, but say they hire you to say you're a salesman and you have really high standards for sales and you're not meeting those, even if your sales are pretty good, then you probably could still get fired. That's Jim Harbaugh. He's been good. If he's a salesman, he's been, making sales. And by sales, I mean wins. But there's a standard up here. He's up here is this standard, and he's performing, somewhere, not low, but somewhere in between that. And the bottom line was, win Big Ten and beat Ohio State. Not just, we talked about national championships, but really it was just beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten, and he'd still be here. Could you imagine Harbaugh would be like God at Michigan if he just won the Big Ten and beat Ohio State, 1 or 2 years out of the 5 or 6 he's been here, but he hasn't done either of those things. So he's not even meeting the minimum. I'd say that's, minimum expectations, because the expectations when he came here was national championships along with the Big Ten and beating Ohio State. But yeah. So anything you want to add, Plax, about Michigan moving forward, upcoming schedule?
I think they're going to lose to Indiana. If they play the way they did yesterday, they're probably a 5-3 team, 4-4. If they play like they did against Minnesota, probably 6-2. But moving forward, they're about 500 for me. I don't think they're going to change that cornerback room. It's not going to change. Not this year, at least. It's young, inexperienced, and too aggressive.
Yeah, and I think I predicted 5-3 for Michigan this year, and I think they could easily go, 4-4, 5-3. But it's not going to be if they go 5-3, it's not going to be a pretty looking 5-3. I think it could be a one of those. Maybe you sneak a win out against a Penn State or Wisconsin, but I could see them getting, taken to the woodshed against Penn State or Wisconsin, and then, getting clobbered by Ohio State again. And, who knows if it goes 4-4, they could drop one to Indiana, who they've beat, what is it, 20 or
25 years, 26 years in a row.
Or, another team like, I don't know, who else could they lose to on their schedule?
Penn State, Wisconsin. I mean, if you don't show up, Rutgers. Honestly, Rutgers could probably beat you if you don't show up.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, but the loss against Michigan State really shows how low of floor that Harbaugh actually can have now. I thought that maybe a lot of Michigan fans really were saying, he has pretty high floor. His Big Ten has a great Big Ten record, something that Brady Hoke and Rich Rodriguez didn't have. But with this loss, it makes it wonder if more teams are going to expose Michigan. You'll see Harbaugh drop to a lower floor, and maybe who knows? Maybe you don't want to say this, but hopefully the wheels don't come off completely, and this turns into a 3-win year. And so thanks for tuning in to Big Time Football Talk, guys. We're going to wrap with that. Stay tuned for next show.